been elected, some people would dispute whether some of those elections were truly free, but leaving that aside, you, back in 1995, supported a constitution which imposed term limits on the president. And then, years later, you decided you didn't believe in term limits anymore. Why was that?
I think term limits is not really the crux of the matter. What is the crux of the matter is the ability of the people to elect, or otherwise. I think we are leaving the core issues and waiting for the peripheral issues, the forms rather than the substance.
We'll get to the substance, but just one other thought on leaders in Africa who have stayed in power for an awful long time. Just off the top of my head, I mean, you're in the top 5 now, but the list includes Mugabe in Zimbabwe, it includes Obiang in Equatorial Guinea, it includes Biya in Cameroon. I just wonder whether this is company that you are proud to keep.
I keep the company of elected leaders. This is the company I keep. Elected through competitive elections from the beginning. So that's the issue. But more important, you should ask the question of what does Africa need? Is it just change of leaders, or is it programs? The way forward in terms of socio-economic transformation. You really pose the issue wrongly. The issue that has crippled Africa has been which way to go, which formula to use. So the problem of Africa is not who, but what.
Well, let's get to the what. Let's try to define what the Museveni strategy for Uganda has really amounted to. And let's start with politics, and let's start with notions of pluralism, democracy, multi-party democracy, and the right to dissent. If we look at what has happened in the last year in your country, I'm thinking particularly of your security forces' reaction to popular protests last year, in April of last year, it doesn't look as though you really do like dissent.
Not at all. I have no problem with the dissent. And I have no problem with popular manifestations. The only contention was when you engage in a manifestation or a demonstration, you should respect the right of others. Kampala is still a crowded city. The infrastructure is, the roads are still narrow. Our argument with those groups was that if you want to demonstrate, agree with the police where to demonstrate and which routes to follow. That's all.
Well, you say that's all, but these walk-to-work protests ended with your security forces killing 9 people, including a child, including 2 people shot in the back, including 2 people shot inside buildings. That doesn't sound like the workings of real democracy.
Those who killed people, like the one who killed a child, has been arrested and is being tried. Those are indisciplined people who abuse their authority, and he's facing charges. Those particular people. There could be some accidental deaths which were not easy to pin down.
Would you accept that it might be useful, given the very high temperature we see in Ugandan politics today, and we've talked about the violence that's been on the streets, would it be useful, do you think, for you to indicate that you do not intend to run again in 2016?
That is for my party to work on, not for television programs.
But no, it's also for you to declare what your intentions are. Do you want to run again in 2016?
I always work with my party. It is my party which will decide what we should do. Of course, with my input, but I don't come here on television to decide my party programs. My party to take party decisions on how to talk.
Well, if you do want to, we'd be delighted to hear them. But if you don't want to, let's move on, because
when we decide what to do, I will come back and
we look forward to that, Mr. President.
And use your services.
But you've made it clear that you believe, the party makes key decisions. I would put it to you that your own party, the NRM, is increasingly unhappy with some of the things that are happening inside your own country, not least what's happening with the oil business and oil contracts. There is one key company, Western company, Tullow Oil, that has been in negotiation with your government for a long time about exploring major tracts of potential oil in the Lake Albert region. Now, the Parliament demanded suspension of the signing of any contracts until new laws had been passed to regulate the oil business in your country. You overrode the Parliament and signed the deal with Tullow anyway. Why did you do that?
We have no problem with the resolution of Parliament. They passed 10 resolutions. The government accepted 8, but did not accept 2 out of the 10.
But they were rather crucial because it meant that you could go ahead and sign a deal which the Parliament had said should be suspended.
First of all, the Parliament that time was operating on forged documents, which they presented in the Parliament, which were forged. Later on, when my party met, my MPs of my party, when we met, who are the majority, we decided not to accept that part of the recommendation. But in any case, we have explored for that oil. We have found it. We have now advanced very far. We are now reaching the production stage. What laws were we using? We were using some laws. So do not give the impression that there was an absence of laws. The law they are talking about is just updating, adding on.
Yeah, well, they think it's very important to update the laws because I think many people inside your country as well as outside, they look at the way other African nations have been affected by having huge oil resources. Maybe they look at Nigeria, maybe they look at Equatorial Guinea and Angola as well, and they talk about the curse of oil. In your own parliament, an MP has claimed that senior ministers in your government received kickbacks from Tullow Oil, which of course they reject, they adamantly reject, but this allegation exists of kickbacks being paid to senior ministers.
It's not only that the minister rejected. I know it because we worked with the police, including the British police here, and the police in Malta, and we found those documents to have been forged documents.
But you do have a corruption problem, Mr. President. You had 2 senior ministers resign in the last few days over an allegation of payments that were made to a senior member of your political party who's a property developer, $60 million. 2 ministers signed off on payments. They said you knew about these payments as well.
I did know about the magnitude of the payments. The issue was not the payments, the issue was the magnitude. I definitely knew about the payments because I am the one who kicked that businessman out of the markets. The problem was that he was given what people consider to be too much money. That's where the contention is.
And I tell you what, it doesn't sit well, does it? In a population which is experiencing 25% inflation, where a quarter of your people are still living below the poverty line, it doesn't look good when this sort of vast sum is swilling around the political business network in Kampala.
Well, it didn't look good, and I'm the one who detected that. I'm the one who started the process of investigation. I am the one who has accepted the resignation of those ministers, and it showed the strength of our system. First of all, the police found out about this problem in time. Second, our Public Accounts Committee did the investigation, and now we have taken action. That's how health systems work. They work by detecting wrongs and correcting them.
Let me ask you about another aspect of your vision for Uganda, and that's your commitment to individual rights as a part of human rights. There has been a great focus in the last couple of years in the West on Uganda's treatment of homosexuals. Are you entirely satisfied that homosexuals in your country are having their human rights respected?
The issue is mishandled by the Western countries and their activist groups. Homosexuals in small numbers have existed in our part of Black Africa. They were never persecuted. They were never...
Well, it is entirely illegal to be homosexual and practice homosexuality in your country, isn't it?
Just listen. They were never persecuted. They were never discriminated. But the difference between us and the Western societies, they were also not promoted. So the problem is on the promotion. The difference between Africa and Western Europe is on the promotion of homosexuality, as if it is something good and so on and so forth. What happened in our traditional society is that the homosexuals will be known, it will not be approved, but it will be ignored, and it will be their private issue.
Well, it obviously it hasn't been ignored, has it? I mean, we've had gay activists who've been murdered. Just last year, we saw a leading gay activist murdered in your country. We now have a parliament which is considering new legislation which would massively increase the punishments for homosexuality, from up to 14 years in prison to a new punishment of life in prison. What is your view as president of that proposal?
My view is that I do not support promotion of homosexuality, but I do not support persecution or discrimination of homosexuals as our society has always done. We never discriminated them, we never marginalized them or discriminated against them.
But Mr. President,
what people resent is promotion.
if the Parliament passes this legislation pushing for life imprisonment for homosexuality, will you block that legislation?
It will depend what the life sentence is for. Is it for promotion, for instance, recruiting young children into that practice by offering money? That's where the problem is. Inducement, manipulating, using money which they collect from the West. That's what I would also not like.
You yourself said just a couple of years ago, you said gay relationships are against God's will. You clearly believe there is a religious as well as a legislative and political need to take action against homosexuality.
Well, it is true that God cannot, it must be, I have not studied the science of how people become homosexuals, but certainly the normal way is to be heterosexual, because that's what nature created us for. But maybe there are some exceptions for some good scientific reasons. If they are there, our culture is keep your private life to yourself, do not impose it on others, do not promote it, just keep your own confidential sexual life to yourself.
A final thought on this. Barack Obama, for one, but other Western leaders as well, have said that they will tie future aid and development funding in a host of countries, including yours, to what they see on the human rights front, but particularly on these gender and sexual identity issues. How do you feel about
that? That would be their biggest mistake, because they should be very careful about Black Africa. Black Africa are humble people. We never impose our views on anybody else. We are not like Europeans or like Arabs who want to impose their views. I normally tell people that when I hear Arabs talking of haram, that's something which is haram. I always tell them that my list of haram is much longer than that one of the Arabs. I don't eat fish because I call it snake. I don't eat chicken because I think if you eat chicken, you will be unstable. I don't eat pigs. I don't eat very many of those things which you people you eat. Even when I come here, I have a problem of what to eat. But I keep this to myself. This is the difference with the black people.
Well, if you're determined to keep it to yourself, can I take it then that you will sack your Minister for Ethics, who just a few days ago took it upon himself to invade a meeting of gay human rights campaigners, close down the meeting, force them all out? Will you now sack him? Because he invaded their personal space.
I will have to study what they were doing. You see what, this question, I have told you, homosexuality is not criminal, if it is personal, you are not discriminated, you are not persecuted. But when you induce young people, so it depends on what they were doing. Those homosexuals, what were they doing?
You told me when I mentioned Barack Obama's position on this that you said, you know, Western governments and leaders, they need to be careful.